Okay, we're live. Welcome back to the Digital Careers Podcast. And today we've got Jason Capobianco with us today. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, mate.
So, Jason Capobianco is a Perth-born international fashion and celebrity photographer, most noted for his crafted cinematic style of storytelling. His high fashion focus has led him to create work for some of the world's biggest brands and publishers, including Vogue, GQ, Harper's Bazaar, Net-a-Porter, Dom Perignon, Clinique, Sotheby's, Lane Crawford and Levi's, photographing the world's leading talent, Cate, Blanchett, Sophia, Loren, Gemma, Judy, Justin Bieber, as well as Asia's superstars Chow Yun Fat, Kwok, Tang Wei, Fan Bingbing and Angela Baby. In parallel to this, Jason has worked with some of Australia's leading visual artists, directing and producing a series of documentaries for the Australian Wildlife Conservancy as part of their artist collaboration series on reducing wildlife extinction in Australia. Having previously lived in Sydney, Paris, Hong Kong and working in China and the APAC region as part of its ongoing creative boom, his latest campaign collaboration found him on a 4-day road trip with WA Tourism and Formula One WA home hero Daniel Ricciardo. So in this episode, it'll kind of be, we'll be going through Jason's story and we'll kind of be learning about his story and how to make it as an international photographer and work with big brands and artists. So yeah, if we can just start with your story and how you got into photography. Did you start quite young? Were you a
No, I
heard you were a model as well. So
yeah, that lasted for about a minute and a half. I was terrible at it, and yeah, thanks, Grace. Yeah, that's kind of the long-running joke in our household. I got to do one modelling job and then that was it. I think I left after that. But yeah, I was kind of always curious on the other side anyway. But yeah, I don't think I sort of started that young. I do distinctly remember only going, right, I'm doing photography when I was 25. Before then I'd sort of finished school, didn't really have any, idea about university or the rest. I was just like, yeah, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. So jumped out, went to London for a bit, had some fun there. And then I actually was in London when I was just like, no, it actually seems like something that I want to pursue. And I didn't have any contacts. So yeah. I was like, okay, what's my easiest option to making this happen? Ended up back in Sydney and sort of called around a couple of photographers that I knew. One of them was being from Perth. His name was Rob Johnson, and yeah, caught up with him recently. Just had a coffee with him the other day when we sort of came back. But really started from zero, just like completely no idea about anything. And we walked into the studio, and he's like dragging all this stuff in. He's like, "Here, can you go and set that up?" And I'm just standing there, just going like, "Yeah, okay." And he sort of just looks at me and said, "You got no idea what you're doing, do you?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "All right." So he was brilliant in that. He just kind of showed me through the whole thing, and he didn't sort of get pissed off. He was just like, "No, cool, we got it." And so I worked with him for a number of years, and then I kind of was. I think during that stage, I was always a bit sort of, I might say, overconfident, because I just walked into kind of the premier photographers agency in Sydney and went, I want to work, and just purely by chance or dumb luck, Richard Bailey had an opening on his team, and Richard had just returned from New York. They went, "All right, you start on Monday." And again, I stepped into that not knowing, because I'd gone from small scale shoots, and then suddenly you're thrown into this giant world of high fashion stuff, and I was a third assistant, so I'm just the one with my head stuck in the camera bag, just loading film and just never looking up really, just like it was all going on, and I'm just too busy, because had 6 Pentax cameras all going at the same time, so they all had to be loaded and logged and films flying everywhere. And so that was my introduction, was just don't drown, you know.
Yeah. were you shooting your own stuff on the side or just mostly assisting?
I sort of just did 5 solid years of assisting and just, just kind of shut up, pay attention, learn as much as you can, because I wanted to sort of get to that stage. So I was just like absorbing everything every day. And I guess what was brilliant with Richard is he taught me how to be a director. You know, like your job on set is such a minutely creative part, and it's 90% about guiding the team. It's everyone you work with, and it's getting everyone to the right point at the right time. And I think that's something that is incredibly valuable that, you know, I learnt from him more than anyone else. It was just, it's all about the team. You know, everyone on this team is brilliant. You just have to get them there. You know, you have to get them to believe in your vision, and you have to guide them and ask them and talk to them in the right way for everyone to hit the right point at the right time. And that's kind of the key, you know.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I've learned recently, like chatting to Grace actually as well, is I thought like making it as a photographer was all about portfolio. So I was like, shoot, keep getting better as a photographer. But I never actually thought like you should, you know, assist other photographers who have like already made it to kind of level up your skills. Like for some reason I never even thought of it that way, but I guess that's the way you can kind of experience those bigger shoots. You can kind of learn from other photographers who like really know what they're doing. Yeah. And kind of get connections that way.
Absolutely. It's, you know, you're definitely sort of connecting and sort of learning from the people you're with, but you're sort of building future connections, and the more trust you kind of have with those bigger clients, they see you on set every other day working as an assistant, but you're building a relationship. They know you for the future. It's like when your time comes, they're your reference. You know, if you jump out into the world and you start shooting, they will back you up. They're clients who've seen you working. They know your work ethic and your ability to be on time and turn up and be professional and all that stuff. That's your CV. It's not your folio or what you've done. It's like it's trust. It's, you know, relationships and trust are kind of the biggest part of this business. And, you know, even sort of getting off track with this a little bit about how I started, but even that I, you know, now going into meetings or talking with new clients, it's never about getting the job first time around. It's always about, let's just go and hang out. I want to get to know people first. It's like, even if I cold call someone and say, hey, what are you guys doing? I'm in town. Do you want to catch up? Just to talk about nothing.
Oh, okay.
It's like, I don't even bring a folio. It's like, let's just go and hang out. And I sort of just say, look, let's just see where we're both at. We might have something in common now. We might have something in common in 2 years' time. It's like, I'm not trying to sell you anything. It's just purely like, I want to get to know whether we're going to work together and have a good working relationship. You know, and then down the line, if jobs turn up that are for me or in my style or way of working, great, we get to work together. And we do it in a great way. It's like, it's not as though I'm trying to sell people into the idea of, hey, you've got to book me because I'm amazing. It's like, no, let's work on the friendship first, and then the work will come continuously after that. You know, it's all, especially in the fashion world, and you know, that's kind of how the business is. It's all about your connections, not in the terms of social climbing. It's just about who knows who and who will vouch for you if you step out of this circle and you go looking for other work. You know, people will back you up. They're familiar with you. It's all about familiarity and being, you know, in people's mind when the right job turns up for you.
Yeah, because I think that sort of connects to your other point where you mentioned it's sort of about a team, because sort of where I'm at now, and I think a lot of photographers in Perth, they just kind of like, they work for themselves. They're sort of, most of the time in this sort of industry, they're the only person on the shoot.
Yep.
So they think, I've got to do everything myself. And from that sort of standpoint, when you're trying to like get work as a photographer, it's very like business oriented. It's like, it's me. And you're kind of just like, hi, can I get this job? Here's my portfolio, da da da. But when you're a team, and you kind of have other people vouching for you, it's more like a social thing, I guess, and it's less like, because when it's just you, it's kind of like very forward.
Yeah.
But if you have like a team or you have that sort of social element, it's kind of flows naturally, and it doesn't feel salesy, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think, as you're saying also, but that being able to do all that stuff, that's kind of your superpower as well. It's a good training ground. I think to
do
have
everything yourself?
to know all the jobs.
Yeah.
That's the key. Is that you don't have to do them, you just have to know how they work.
Okay.
So if one part of your team is under pressure, not performing, doing whatever, you know why. It's not like as though it's just they're hidden behind this wall. It's like you know what a stylist does, you know what a hairstylist does, you know what everyone's doing. You know generally how the set build is going. You know what the creative director is up to. You know what the art director is doing. You know all of their jobs loosely in a way that if things get off track, you can directly go to the part that's not working.
Yeah.
And you sort of understand.
Because I guess when it's just you on the shoot, you know, like, you're the only person who can be held accountable for that. When it's a team, you know, it flows better because you have different people managing different things. And then say if like the hair was off or something, like, you know where that came from, I guess. Yeah.
The thing is though, it is always your responsibility. No matter what happens,
even if you've got a team,
everyone's part of your team, but it's still your responsibility, and you've got to be the one to step up and go, I don't think the hair's right, let's go and fix it before we start wasting time and money, but know how to fix it. So you've got to have enough of a hair reference in your head to go, oh, it's got to look more like this, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. So it's kind of knowing all of the elements of what, you know, your favorite world of working is like, understand how the images come together, what makes images great, what makes them not great, understand how to problem solve. I think at the end of the day, we're amazing creative problem solvers, you know. That's what we do most of the time. We're spending our time going, oh, right, okay, how do we make this the best version it can be? You're just constantly using creativity to solve problems or shortcomings in budget or time or daylight or whatever. It's like, what can I make out of this situation right now?
Yeah.
Knowing that there's a finite limit to the sun or to the money, to the whatever whatever you've got in your pocket, there's a limit to it. So you've got to make the best out of those things.
Do you think it's like, say you have a whole team on set, do you think it's like everyone should have that responsibility, like or it's more so the photographer?
The ones who really excel have that.
Okay.
You talk to a makeup artist who's amazing at their craft, they'll know all about lighting. They'll know what light you're using. They'll know what direction it's coming from. They'll know how much scrim you've got. They'll know what product they need to use to get the best out of that thing. Hairstylists the same. They'll look at what you're using, and they'll adjust their work to what you're doing.
Okay.
So everyone at that level, at that top level, will know everyone else's game. And so there'll be 6 of you on set who all know what's going on, and they'll know all the pieces of the puzzle. And so now it's just a matter of moving them all together.
Okay.
So, you know, that just comes from experience. It's just time after time after time of shooting and learning and reviewing, I think, is the important part. Because, you know, you go home at night, you're knackered, you're doing whatever, but go back the next day and review it. Understand what worked, understand why it worked, what didn't work. So next time you step in, you're not going in blind. You're like, okay, cool. I remember this could have been better. That didn't work because of that. And so they all become part of your working formula for the next step, I guess. So it's less about tunnel vision of, I'm a photographer, I need to just take pictures. Yeah. And it's more about understanding teamwork and in the broader perspective of,
teamwork.
You know, how do we get... It's the ultimate collaboration. It's kind of like always going... I honestly never think, when I'm on set, I'm never the person to sort of go, you know, I'm the boss of this thing. It's no way. It's like I'm just one part of 10 people who are all making decisions, and I've got to lead them and talk to them and guide them in the right direction because it is my responsibility. But I'm never above them. It's like we are all in this at the exact same level. You know, everyone's doing, and sometimes you have to get a bit grumpy and ask for more, but you know, that's very rare. I think when you start to build teams with people, people know what you like. People are willing to work with you because of what you like. And I think if you, you know, carry your team all the way through and get them over the finish line in the best way you possibly can, then that's a win, you know, in my book.
So when you're working at that high level, everybody kind of knows what's going on. Like for those big shoots, everyone's on it, and then there's like ideas kind of flowing, and people are almost like suggesting things to you, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, all those ideas are coming on the fly. There's no. It's sort of starts in a premeditated way, but it ends up always somewhere other. I always figure that, you know, the process is always kind of weirdly the same, and it's no different from me in my perspective and someone starting out in there as a newer photographer or creative, and it's like a job comes in and you suddenly go into this, oh shit, what am I going to do? You know, it never changes, or it doesn't for me. Like, I don't have this abundance of overconfidence to say, oh, I can do everything. And it's always kind of the same. It's like you sort of go into this mode of going, oh crap, all right, now I've got to do something that's amazing. You know, like that's sort of, you get overwhelmed by the amazingness of it. And then I just go into the process of doing my rhythm, doing the things that I do. I start storyboarding, collecting stuff, sort of finding inspiring bits, but in that rhythm of just doing banal things, you're kind of just mentally prepping yourself to walk through that door. And the funny thing is, you do all the prep work and you build storyboards and you do presentations and you do all that, and that only gets you to the door. And you've got to be willing at any given moment to throw that whole script that you've built out and just go. And just trust yourself from there on, because everything can change. You know, you can be planning for a great outdoor shoot. It's rainy, it's sunny, it's just like everything that you've worked on for weeks and weeks and weeks, you could be throwing it out the window. And you've got to have the confidence to get to that point and just let the script go and just go, right, we're here, let's go, let's figure this out now, let's make the best we can. You know, it'll be very different from what you had hoped or what you'd built. But I think developing that sense of creative confidence is sort of really important. Just to trust yourself. I think that's the key. Trusting that you may not get what you'd planned to get, but you will get something that can be amazing if you sort of just go with it. You know. Yeah. It's having that, you know, feeling your way through it, and sometimes it's like flying blind. You're like, I don't know, the answer's right here somewhere. And we'll get to it, but I don't know exactly what that is. Yeah. And it's funny because I think people always, you know, so ask, is there a path to making it or being, you know, having a creative career? And the weird thing is, I think the path is always the one that you leave behind. It's never in front of you. So you're kind of walking, you know, it's almost like walking on an empty beach. It's like it's nice and clear in front, but the path's always behind you. Yeah. It is like, I don't know where the path is, but I'll just walk where I feel like I should walk. And then, it's kind of weird like that, you know. You have to have a great amount of trust in yourself, in your team, and then you just have to have the practice and the skills to back it up, which comes from, as you said right in the beginning, it's like working it by yourself, going through all the jobs, knowing what they all do. You know, all that stuff is just your training ground for, you know, that's your gym workout for the confidence at the other end to walk into the unknown space and just keep creating and, you know, and living that. So, it's a tricky one, but time, and just don't beat yourself up about it, because, you know, that's the hard part, because you always want to be better and do better, and it's just, that never ends. You know, that's every job I go on to, you know. You finish it and you're like, oh, it could have been like that. Could have been this a little bit better. It's, you know, it's always the way.
And what's it like working sort of under a creative director? Because normally, like on every shoot that I'm on, I'm sort of directing it, because where I'm at now, I'm not sort of a part of a team or anything like that, so I'm like directing. But what's it like having a creative director like on set shooting?
I kind of love it. You know, I think it's really nice to. I'm just always a collaborator. I much prefer working with a bunch of people than working by myself. So just get bored of my own company. So I think where the art director and creative directors come into it is that you're building something for a client. So there's a further use past you. You're creating the imagery, but then that imagery is still got to be turned into something other. So it's kind of, using that, understanding their job also, where it's got to go, what purpose it's got to serve, who's it attracting, what's the audience, all those things. What is my audience that I'm aiming for? What do they look for? What gets their attention? All those things. So you've got to know the creative director's job. So it's all about knowing everyone's work. And, creative directors are also a balancing act of amazing creative, but they're also great strategists. So they're knowing that their client needs those things. How do we interpret those things through imagery? How do we make those two sit together nicely? And, I kind of find it really fascinating. And even though I would never probably be a creative director, it's kind of, I find their job interesting too, because it's the end experience. It's like, the experience we have as creatives in a studio or on location or whatever. It's like what they deal with is how it's interpreted by the public.
Yeah.
Once it's left your hands and it's out there in the world standing on its own feet, how did it work? Did it not work? Why didn't it work? It's all those kind of questions that the creative director has to dig into and understand and really know culture and time and little tribes of people and where it's going and all that.
So, say on these like big magazine shoots or something like that, when there's like normally a creative director on set, is it? Or sometimes you're kind of leading the whole show?
Depends on the scale of the job.
Yeah.
Like for magazines or in a sort of, either online editorial or they don't necessarily always turn up, but it sort of depends on, scale of shoot and who's on it and how do they feel like they need to? Do they trust you to go and do it on your own? There's all those questions that sometimes they might be on the other side of the country. Yeah. There's all that stuff. So there's a few different factors into having them on set versus not. But yeah, sometimes you do get lucky and they're just like, yeah, cool. Yeah. Just send me some pictures.
Yeah.
Like, great.
Yeah.
This is good. But, I do like having a team there and sort of everyone, because it's kind of fun,
Yeah.
You get to hang out with
Shooting
people all
with
day
people
and just having fun.
Like in your head.
Yeah.
Because I think that aspect of like having other people's opinions kind of shaping your work is like a really good thing. Because like you could have one idea, but then all those suggestions that come in it's really good. Because I think some photographers, they kind of like, I want to shoot this my way, and it's like just one way of looking at it, but it's good to have a team in perspective.
Yeah, I do love that. And I mean, that's another reason why Grace and I work so well together, because it's like having two different visions on the same thing at any one time. And it's like, because you do, when you're shooting, you get stuck in the mechanics and the kind of all the stuff, and you just lose sight of the big picture. It's really easy to do, and it happens all the time, every day. So it's kind of always great to have someone else going, oh yeah, but what about this? What about that?
Yeah.
Check out this angle. This looks really cool. And ideas can come from anyone or everywhere. And it's, not, I don't get possessive over ideas. I'm just like, they're just starting points.
Yep.
Nothing really makes, any real sense until you're in the moment shooting it, changing it, evolving it, kind of feeling your way through it. Because at the end of the day, my sort of response to working is always push the button when it feels right, not when it looks right. And it's kind of like, you've got to just wait for the moment, and everything may be just perfectly in place, but you're like, it's perfect, whatever.
Yeah.
Perfect is just so boring, and it's, it's like until it feels like the right moment, then you push the button.
Yeah, I think as a photographer, you got to kind of have that balance between like aesthetics and like technical stuff, like get it sharp, get it well composed, and then the other side is like more creative, artistic side, which is like let go of that. So it's like a dance between the two. Yeah, you have to let it live its own life, kind of thing. Some of the the favourite pictures in my folio, I didn't even shoot them. My assistant did, because it's it's sort of
sometimes I just don't want to do it. Like
Yeah.
it's sort of, I have a weird love-hate with pictures in that way that for me it's sort of strange. It's like if I'm doing it and I'm living that moment, then I sort of sometimes feel bad that when I push the button, it's already almost the end of that moment. Like it's been recorded. It's almost like you go to a nice rose bush and you cut the rose off and you go like, oh, it's on its way to dying now. Like it looks really pretty and it's amazing, but now the only thing for it to do is die, which is kind of sometimes how I feel about pictures. And the reason why I don't want to push the button is sometimes I want to just live that moment a little bit longer. You know, you sort of go, I don't want to, because there's sort of a finality almost to pushing the button because the process is so engaging and so nice. And when you do get that great dynamic with people, or you know, you're shooting, it's like you just want to, you know, keep that kind of feeling going. And sometimes maybe it's a combination of a great memory versus, you know, the end of something. So you're always kind of, you know, there's a bit of sadness when you've got the shot. Yeah. You're like, oh, okay, we finished that now. That was really nice. You know, like it's
an enjoyment of like taking a photo.
Yeah.
And
it's more of the enjoyment of the dynamic between people. You know,
that's kind of that's like why I'm a creative. Honestly, is that the interaction between people.
Exactly.
And it's just like working on a project, getting different ideas flowing. Like, oh, what if we try this, or what if we try this?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's why I am like a creative person and photographer.
Yeah. And it's nice because you do get absorbed in that moment, and it's kind of really cool to engage so closely with someone. It could be a total stranger, but you're both building this thing together. It's sort of always good to remember it, that you're not, you know, photographing the person, you're photographing the interaction.
Yeah.
And you know, it's always about trying to get that amazing dynamic between people. I think that's where the magic part is, and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, because something I enjoy watching, because I'm a fan of George Lucas and Star Wars, and he's got like all these films showing like the behind the scenes and all that, and I just think like they show like the team working together, doing the models, and like it was just super inspiring for me. So I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be a part of, like some sort of creative team.
I think just jump on any team doing anything at all. Just whoever's doing anything creative, just jump in just to see what you can learn and figure out, whether it's a film or a photo or, you know, a dance thing or whatever. Just like find people doing interesting stuff and just go, I'll jump in, you know, just to do whatever, just to have fun and get different groups of people and different experiences and different ways of viewing the world and creativity. It's kind of nice.
And sort of back to your story. So you grew up in Perth, and then did you go to London after that, you said?
I grew up here, jumped out when I was about 18, 19, went to Sydney.
That's when you started assisting? Or?
No, that was the first time. Just kind of, jumped out of Perth, see what was going on over there, hung out there with friends, and then went across to London for a bit, and that's sort of when I decided to do photography, and then came back to Australia from that round. Okay. And then started the fashion photography road from there. That's kind of where that part took off.
Was that inspired from London? Because it's interesting you came from, because I kind of see London as one of the creative capitals of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where all like the fashion and magazines and everything's sort of happening. But then to come from that back to Sydney to start, did you feel like there was a step back?
No, because I honestly thought I was going to do photojournalism. So that was kind of where I thought I was beginning, and then never ended up going down that road. I just don't think I had what it took to be a photojournalist. They're a special breed of people who are bloody amazing at what they do, and I don't know. I never felt kind of comfortable being in difficult situations, but just being there as a pure observer. I'm much more of a get in and help kind of thing, and you know, sort of having that removed. But I know there's all the kind of, you know, the conversation and however you view photojournalism in that way. It's, you know, there's a million different ways to view it. But I thought it was that, and then how did I get to?
So you came back.
Photography ended up, to
Sydney and assisted for like 5 years, was it?
Yeah. And I think it was just the people that I was sort of hanging out with, and through the 5 minutes of modelling, met a few people in the kind of fashion industry, and then just hanging out with them, and then eventually ended up jumping down the fashion road.
Like from the modelling aspect, like did you learn anything from being behind the lens? Did it?
I'll probably say but I don't know. I just felt it gave me a different perspective on how I work with models. It's like, again, it's knowing everyone's job, knowing what the model's going through, knowing how much work they bring to it.
Yeah, I think it's important to know how they're feeling, because that's another aspect of photography. It's not just shooting; it's kind of it's that connection. It's making them feel comfortable on set. Helping them kind of work with directing them with what you want. Yeah. But that's another aspect. So.
But I still do that even to this day when I'm sort of talking to the talent and getting them into the shot. I'm actually in there performing it for them. It's going, here, just do this, do that, kind of all that. And then they're like, yeah, cool. So I'm kind of just, always in front of the camera as well, trying to get the message across and make sure that they understand where we're going with the story. And, as sometimes it's just more the performance and building that relationship of, like, I'm happy to jump in and be an idiot and do what I have to do to make you comfortable, to get the best out of you. Like, I'm not never demanding that you do this and that if I'm not willing to do it. Yep. As well, sometimes even on a lot of those shoots where, the model's in really kind of tough or awkward positions, and sometimes, being in Australia, you shoot a lot of, summer stuff in winter and all of that, which then sometimes it gets really difficult because models are freezing and, on set, and sometimes it's a case where it's like, if it comes down to it and they're feeling really awkward, it's like, okay, I'm going to get down to just my T-shirt and whatever, shoes off. It's like, I'll put myself in the same position as you. It's like, if you have to freeze, I'll freeze with you and we'll do this together. Yeah. And you just have to,
that's such
get
an
it done.
important element in being a photographer, I think. Putting yourself in their shoes, and if they're uncomfortable about something, like, it's like relieving the tension. Like sometimes when you come on set, it's like photography is also like the moment you see the model or meet the model, it's like kind of making them comfortable, also relieving that tension of when maybe they've got to be on camera, it's like they can freeze or whatever, so you can help them.
And that, that was exactly what happened with the, we're up in Exmouth doing the Daniel Ricciardo thing, and, it's still winter, so it wasn't hot, and, out in the middle of the ocean, and it's kind of cold and breezy and all that stuff, and poor Daniel was jet lagged and knackered and just he wasn't up for getting in the water. So and we're on the back of the boat and on the transom, and we just have to get this shot done, and it's like, okay, you feel like shit and you're freezing, so I'm just stripped off and I jump down and I'm sort of shooting it from the water, and I'm sort of sitting there just with the camera with like a waterproof blanket over it, and I'm just getting drowned in waves and stuff like that, and I'm just shooting it going like, so it's kind of that commitment to showing the other person that you're as committed to this and you'll do whatever it takes, and you're not just forcing them to to do this thing. It's like, if it's got to be done, I'll do it. I'll just jump in and make it happen. However that needs to go down, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah,
make
just
it
goes
work.
to show photography so much more than just pushing a button. There's so many things that come into it.
Yeah, it's all about leading that team of people in the right way, showing them what you want and showing them that you're not afraid to get in and get it done, however it needs to be done, and which is the fun part. So always jump in with teams and just get everyone else's perspective and fun, and take it all in, digest it, and see what comes.
But you've not only shot in Sydney, you went international probably from after Sydney. You went sort of international.
Sydney, went to Paris for a while, a couple of years there.
Is that shooting like Fashion Week?
Yeah, no, just living there.
So you just kind of went. Did you have much of a plan, or?
No, I was dating a fashion designer at the time and sort of based in Paris, and then just working mostly around there. And again, was working there with some friends and contacts that I had from Sydney. So it was kind of, there was the connection of that. Again, but it's just sort of always that group of people that you work with, and sort of you never know where you'll again run into them along the way, but that sort of built out. And then spent a few years working in Paris, and then for the most part just kept getting calls out of China, Hong Kong,
Really?
jobs in that region, which was kind of weird because the funny story is how I met Grace was from this picture I did of Jamie Oliver when I was in Sydney, like way back 2004, I'll say. Yeah, about then. I was just doing pictures of chefs and food and for magazines in Sydney, and that's kind of what I did as my first step out of assisting and just working in general, was editorially just shooting a lot of food stuff and hanging out with chefs because I cook. I've been cooking for like 30 years, so that's my other creative angle.
Yeah, I've seen the Instagram content.
Oh, you've seen it.
Wow.
Okay.
Man of many talents and great stories.
Yeah, so that's my other thing. And so, I sort of had been shooting a lot of chefs and all the rest, and then Jamie Oliver came to Sydney and was working with Luke Mangan at one of the restaurants that they were doing, and so shot some pictures of Jamie, sent them off to the magazine, they ran and thought nothing of it, and then 7 years later, I was in Paris. An art director in Hong Kong saw the picture of Jamie and went, "Who's this guy? Let's get him." And so
Stop that photo.
off that, totally random, he's like, "We need you to come and shoot Chow Yun Fat, who's like the kind of Robert De Niro of Asian cinema." He's like, he's the guy. So that we're doing an ad campaign for Crown Casino, and somehow the picture of Jamie that I'd shot years before was the catalyst for that happening. And then, then it turns out that the makeup artist who was on the job in Hong Kong knew Grace. So she's like, "Oh, you should, drop past and see my friend Grace. She works at Vogue, on your way back once we finish the job." So I was like, "Yep, cool, that sounds great." Took my folio with me and did a little divert because we were shooting in Thailand. So I did a divert on the way home, and dropped into Vogue and was like, met Grace there. So it was kind of a funny thing, and then years later we end up married, and that's kind of how it all came together. Which then, funnily enough, I messaged Jamie Oliver about that the other week. I was like, "Mate, sorry, I still owe you a beer. It's been like 14 years now." And I was like, "This is how Grace and I got together. You helped me matchmake my wife." And he was just laughing. He's like, "Oh, mate, love a good love story."
Yeah.
So we were sort of joking about doing a 20-year reunion because he was going to be back in Sydney. Jamie was supposed to be doing some work, and then COVID came and kind of blew that plan out. So that was kind of a funny, got hooked up by Jamie Oliver. That was quite a funny way to do it. But so that's how the Grace and I story came together.
And then did you kind of like start dating Grace, and like, is that how you came to live in Hong Kong and do more work?
Yeah, well, no, because we met her. Funny thing was, Grace just presumed I was gay and thought nothing of it. So I kind of left, and I was like, "Oh, wow, that didn't work." I was like, "She was pretty hot." And then I left the office and thought nothing of it. But then she called back half an hour or so later, and she's like, "Oh, my beauty director's just come back from a lunch break. She probably wants to see your beauty stuff." And so anyway, I went back to the office, met the rest of the team, and did all that. So, but then thought nothing of it. But then what was it? Probably went back to Australia maybe 6 months later. We sort of had been emailing on and off just sort of to catch up and see when we could start shooting together.
Was sparks flying at that point, or you weren't sure?
No, it was just kind of, just another sort of friendship building along the way, and sort of spent time building the relationship and potentially doing some work together. So I said, "Oh, look, I'm going to be in Hong Kong. Maybe we can shoot something for Vogue." So that's how we just started working together. We'd worked together 2 or 3 times, I think, before we actually went out for a drink after a shoot once. And
Cool.
then it kind of goes from there. So that was sort of how the beginning of Asia started, and then I sort of kept working in that neighbourhood and more, and I was kind of always more interested in working in Asia rather than doing the New York fashion road. You know, that sort of, to me, it just felt a bit, I don't know, cliche, for want of a better word.
That's kind of how I feel about where fashion is at the moment. I'm more interested in like the fashion scene in Japan than say like the European scene, even the Western scene, because I feel like the Western fashion scene, it's more kind of, it's not about the creativity, it's more about like showing off in a way. That's kind of the feeling. I mean,
it is at the moment, it feels very much like that now. I think probably in, you know, previous decades before now, it was all about the creativity, and that's sort of what was driving it all. But now it's sort of become very, you know, selfie voyeuristic sort of showing off. But I think previous to that, it was all about pushing creative boundaries, and that was what was really interesting.
Yeah, have you seen a shift, like maybe over the past 10, 20 years in the fashion scene? And if so, like, what is that shift, and what do you think is driving it?
Good question. I don't know. I think the obsession when I sort of started and in the earlier years, everything was about the kind of the designers and the creativity at the point of creation. But now it's about, you know, the designers feeding the influencers, and they become the point of interest, not the designing part itself, not the creating part, which is kind of, that's where I feel it's just moved the focus of, you know, where the sort of the viewing and the interaction is taking place is very, very different points. I think that, and that's just a technology and a social thing that, you know, has allowed it to happen, which is, you know, good and bad. It is what it is. It's just different times and different things. So
do you think, say, 10, 20 years ago, people were buying, say, a design item because of the design and the creativity, but now it's more so because an influencer wore it, or because it's like a trendy thing at the time?
I think people had pretty clearly defined, you know, ideas about designs they liked and people that they followed, and, you know, it was because it wasn't so immediate. You sort of had to make a bit of a commitment to a certain look or a style or a, you know, a social way of acting, dressing, like being a part of a certain group didn't have the immediacy of social media. So it was a longer, slower burn, I guess. Whereas now we sort of jump between things very quickly because the evolution of technology means that we can move quickly between everything. And now maybe it's the fact that we can jump between everything all at once, you know. It makes it, interesting as well as, you know, uninteresting at the same time, because attention span and, I don't know, committed to certain things, or getting deeply involved in things. Maybe at the moment we just skim along the surface rather than do deep dives into stuff, which... Yeah,
for sure. It's very like trend oriented.
Yeah.
But at the same time, fashion's become more like accessible. Like I've seen more people interested in it. But it's very like definitely trend oriented now. Yeah.
It's all about that, and it's maybe it is the case that people do chase that sort of, they chase the rush of the kind of, you know, the likes rather than
the material,
the kind of the creativity. It's the engagement has become the key more than the creation part of it. So slightly different take on it. But
how are you getting, like, because you were living in Paris, how did you initially get that work in China? Like,
random.
Just random?
Random. Totally random. That was the thing.
Was social media like a thing at that point?
Probably in its
Facebook.
Infancy.
MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace. That was 2007. I'll say, when that kicked off.
But was that a part of your work, using social media, or not really? That social media was just
not at all. No, because it wasn't even an option. It was still just like, yeah, it was MySpace. It was, you know.
So how did people see
I'm one
your
of those
work?
people who grew up before and into the internet. So, you know, it's kind of two different worlds. But, you know, the very reason coming back to Perth was quite funny in the way that, you know, people ask me and they're like, what was it like when you left? I was like, it was analog. There was no, you know, if you wanted to be creative, you had to leave because there was no creative jobs as such. Or if they were very few and there was a long line for them. So the only option I had was to jump out. And if you wanted to build a folio, do stuff, you know, you just had to leave for opportunity, not because you wanted to.
Yeah.
There just wasn't. There was no connectivity. There was no internet. There was no connectivity. There was no way to get. There was 2 magazines that might have been fun to work for.
Yeah.
And apart from that, that was it. They were the only outlets. So
Kind of had to.
what are your chances? You just had to jump and make a go of it. And I think that's what was really interesting about that time especially. And people always ask me, and they're like, what's up with people from Western Australia? How come they always kind of go and do good things wherever in the world? And it's like, I think the ones that were sort of, I guess in my time, you realise you had nothing to go back to. You sort of go, if I want a creative life, I have to dig my nails in and just hang on. Because if I go home, there was nothing more to do. You know what I mean? You might have got a couple of jobs and that was it. Then you'd be shooting weddings every weekend.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's that determination to just go, no, I've got to make a go of this, and no matter what happens, I'm going to stick to it. And you know, and gladly that's changed a lot now, and you can sort of exist here, have the best of both worlds, have an amazing place to live, and still have creative opportunities, which is bloody fantastic, because you know they weren't there when I sort of jumped out the first time. That's for sure. Yeah, so it was really a huge change, and that's why when I came back, I was like, yes, it happened. Like it was, you know, I've been away for 30 years, so you know, it was a long time out. Felt like I just went on like one giant lap of the world for 25 years of that, and you know, then came back. So.
And was it just France and China, or other places as well that you went to?
Lived in Hong Kong, China, no, not China, Hong Kong, Paris, but most of them just travelling, just working in and out of places, not
would they
based
fly
in
you
Hong
out
Kong.
and that sort of
Yeah,
thing?
based in Hong Kong, but just working India, Indonesia, and then across to Europe, and you know, sort of Thailand, all over the place there, and then up into China all the time. But I always felt more comfortable in Asia than I did in anywhere else. You know, that's kind of part of, maybe growing up and travelling there as a young kid. I think it's just that sound, smell, kind of everything. Just I just feel super comfortable in being in Asia, and have a different set of goals. I think, you know, the difference being in, say, Europe or the US, you sort of, there's very much a ladder of...
Are you shot in the US as well?
No, I didn't. But that was another reason why I was sort of not really interested there, that there's very much a ladder. You slot into your rung on the ladder, and then you just work like hell, step by step, up the way. In Asia, it's very different. It's like you just jump in at any level and just go, you know what, I'm going to have a go at this. And the funny thing is, people won't necessarily quiz you about it. They'll be like, you say you can do all this stuff, but can you? You know, whereas that people would quiz you in in other cities, but in Asia it was a whole lot looser, and you could just turn up and sort of have a go for a particular job and just see, which is good and bad, you know, in a way. If you've got the skills to pull it off, it's great, and it's a really fun and energetic way of working. But I think sometimes maybe the Europe and the US thing is very much you just got to grind your way up, you know,
the ladder,
up, get to your position.
More of like a hierarchy.
Yeah, whereas Asia's a bit looser and a bit more fun. And
I definitely felt that in Japan, because I had the opportunity to shoot Japan Fashion Week, and I kind of just applied, and I think anyone can sort of apply, and then they look at your stuff, and you can go. But when I was there, I just felt it was like there wasn't this sort of like elitism at all with these fashion shows. They were just like, come in, shoot, like come. You can. I was like, can I go backstage and shoot? I was like, just like they just let you in, and it's like they didn't even necessarily know who I was. Like
That's great.
So yeah, there was this like very welcoming vibe there in the fashion scene.
Yeah, I think you sort of, they sort of judge you by your enthusiasm, and you kind of want to get in and be a part of it, and that's kind of, sometimes it's a really nice thing to do, because everyone who's there is just super excited to be there. And
yeah, and it feels like in maybe Australia there's more limitations on getting into the scene, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a longer, slower process. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's all about building the relationship first, and it's this long sort of burn and getting really comfortable with people and sort of trust and all that stuff. And that also is a great way of working, I think, having that trust. But I kind of like the fast looseness of Asia too. Sometimes it's the fun thing there is that you can be on set and you can just have a crazy idea and no one will say no. They'll just be like, yeah, let's do it. There's almost like no afterthought, and you can do whatever you feel like, and people are just like, yeah, that'll be fine. We won't need to block the street or do any of that. Just go, run out in the traffic. Who cares? It'll be fine.
I like that sort of environment, because I suppose in Australia, especially in Perth, it's everything's very safe on set, which is like, it's good. Yeah. But then in Asia, you get that it's a bit more loose and maybe a bit more creative freedom.
Yeah, I mean, the only time that I sort of got told to get off the rooftop was when the helicopter was landing at the peninsula. You're sort of standing on the rooftop there, and then clearly you're going to get blown off the roof by the helicopter. But apart from that, they were like, yeah, you guys can just shoot there, it's fine, don't worry about it, just up you go. So we're just sort of working our way out there, and those kind of things where they just like, you'll be right, just don't do anything stupid.
What sort of stuff were you doing in Indonesia? Was it?
They were just jobs that would spring up from mostly sort of ad things and editorial things that would just come up, and I'd just get calls from people in Asia who would just be like,
is it like fashion,
cool, what are you doing?
Mostly
some were just more commercial advertising, some were fashion stuff, some were working with influencers, some were, so it was a bit of a mixed bag, but there's lots of really interesting jobs going on up there, and there's a lot of dynamic, and it's kind of, as it's a growing industry too, like it's kind of fun that it to be a part of it in its beginning stages, and during its as it's becoming something is lots of fun.
I think there's a lot of potential in Indonesia. Like I've seen that creative scene like boom, whether it's like the tech scene, and I think there's sort of a bit of a fashion scene coming up out of Jakarta, I think. But there's a lot of potential, and the fact that they're pretty close to us.
And it's just fun, just kind of mixing it up and learning new stuff and jumping in with people that, you don't generally get exposed to on a day-to-day basis. And it's kind of just nice because everyone's having a great time and learning from each other and doing all that stuff. So,
it's always good vibe.
But I've always had lots and lots of fun on all of the trips that sort of happen throughout Asia. It just, they've always just been fun, like loads and loads of fun along the way. So you go off on crazy adventures, out into the middle of nowhere, and you're like, yep, this is good. I like this.
Cool. And do you speak any like other languages other than English?
Terribly, yeah.
Because
no,
I'm interested to know how you kind of like work with people, in different countries, and you.
I don't tell Grace how much Cantonese I understand, because that's because her and Theo always kind of use it against me. They're always like whispering to each other in Cantonese. I'm like, hang on a minute, I know what's going on here. You guys are up to something again. So they always switch between English and Cantonese. But Grace is always she speaks to Theo pretty much 95% in Cantonese at home, which is brilliant. So he's really just getting it cemented into his head, and just, he's already, super fluent, and he has all of that already. So, give it a few more years and that'll be embedded for life. So that's kind of brilliant, And because Grace speaks Mandarin, Cantonese, and English. So she's sort of all over it in terms of language, whereas I'm sort of just always listening for the Cantonese part. And my Italian's terrible, so don't even bother asking me about that. It's like I make attempts, but it takes a while to get my ear tuned into Italian. I went to Milan recently, and it sort of took a few days, but I managed to sort of get there after a bit of time. But with my very limited vocabulary, but yeah, it's all good. I certainly won't pass as an Italian, but
Yeah.
I can get around. Yeah, and I can get around in Hong Kong, in generally chatting with
Like the
cab
basics
drivers and restaurants and stuff, and doing basic things, which is all good. Yeah, so I need to brush up on them skills. Yeah.
Well, I think you learn a lot when you're living in that place, and I think definitely being around Grace and Theo, you're like picking up stuff all the time, so that's like helpful because I find because I did a 3-week course in Yogyakarta.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe even like 10 years ago or something. But it was like a very intensive course, and I like learnt a lot. But whenever I go back to Indonesia, it's like I'm always picking up stuff, and it's, you kind of need to be around it to keep it going, I guess.
Has it evolved a lot as well? Like in what you learnt originally to now, like when you listen, you're like, oh, hang on a minute, there's a whole bunch of new words that I don't know here.
There's more formal Bahasan, and there's like the casual stuff. So I've got a few Indonesian friends here, and I'm just like picking up the few bit of nuances. But yeah, that's kind of a good thing about Perth. I think it's like a very multicultural city, so you can kind of meet people, and they have sort of international connections, and then you can go and like meet their friends and.
Yeah, I think also, working especially from where we are, it's just that whole APAC region. There's so much fun stuff going on there. It's just go and find it. Like just jump out, go and meet people, get on a plane, just go and pull up meetings with art directors and say, hey, what are you guys doing? I live just around the corner. Be on a plane, there's so many people are kind of really enthusiastic too about those interactions. It's kind of nice to, to jump in because they'll always meet you and say hi. And then it might happen 2 years later, 3 years later, they might call you up for a job. But I, definitely encourage people to jump out and sort of get around our whole neighbourhood on this side for sure. Yeah.
What's the creative scene like in Hong Kong? Because I was speaking to a friend, Vanessa, and she was saying she's very knowledgeable on sort of the art scene in Asia. She was saying Hong Kong is kind of the arts capital of Asia. Would you agree with that? Or?
I wouldn't say in terms of making art. I'd say in terms of selling art. Yeah, probably. But creatively, I'd say more towards China. There's some really, there's a lot of work going on there and a lot of interesting stuff. But
the fashion scene bigger in China, isn't it?
Yeah. Just in terms of numbers, and Hong Kong as it's going through its own kind of dramas now and its own transition, it'd be hard to tell what happens there in the future. Yeah, but really fascinating things with a lot of artists in China, more so than Hong Kong. Hong Kong's always like an amazing hub because it's so condensed, and Art Basel turns up and everyone sort of goes, and it becomes like a week-long party, and everyone connects, and so there's those kind of event-based things that happen in Hong Kong because everyone's just there, and it's there's millions of people all in a very small space, which and they're all kind of quite hungry for fun stuff to do, so it's an easy sell,
But there's not much of a fashion scene, you'd say, like.
There is, like, there's there are a few designers and creatives, but I mean there's some insanely good talent. Especially in Hong Kong itself, and as with your time with Wing and Wing Sha's bloody amazing, and his whole history, and so there are kind of all these incredible talent who have Hong Kong as a home base. But in terms of just larger numbers of creativity, I think that China and the whole region is sort of starting to really
I suppose
develop more.
Hong Kong would definitely be a good base because you're kind of got Southeast Asia nearby, and then China as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of good if you want to work in that region.
Yeah, the big challenge of just going to chuck that. The big challenge of Hong Kong is the cost. You just can't afford to be there if you're not earning.
Oh, it's like one of the most expensive cities in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, still. And it's crazy, that's the biggest hurdle to a lot of creatives. And even, Grace and I had been there for 12 years, and still you've just got to be hustling every single day. You don't get a day
It's
off.
definitely a hustle city. Like I can feel that when I was on the street, like people walking around busy, trams, like people lining up for stuff.
Yeah. Every person in every industry is hustling because it's a damn expensive city. And it, you know, it's funny because you get, you know, you paid pretty well, but the money ends up, you know, being used back, and the city takes it back again. Like just in the process of living and all the rest is like super expensive, and rent is crazy, and you know, you just got to be on all day long. And yeah, you know, even when we had Theo, and you know, it's funny talking to people in Australia, and you're sort of like talking about having helpers in the house and whatever, nannies and stuff, and it's like, yeah, the nanny's there so you can go and hustle. It's not a luxury. It's like, I need to make money to, you know, keep going. So it's kind of more, you know, in that respect that everyone there is hustling all day, every day. So that, in terms of creativity, creates a really interesting dynamic too. Things are kind of fast and punchy and kind of, you know, they can explode into really big things really quickly. But in terms of being in a creative city or in a city like that, so you just get exposure to, you know, to people and talent, and, you know, every other night there's an event of something going on with someone, and it's kind of, you know, so your days are full, but your nights are also full, and, you know.
And I suppose you also have, you're kind of meeting people from all around Asia, because Hong Kong's kind of this hub where people come and do business.
Yeah, and also people from all over the world. So it's kind of, you know, a pretty incredible city to be in.
So was that a good city for you to kind of make connections?
Yeah. You join a lot of dots in Hong Kong, which is, you know, it's kind of fab, and you know, you get to sort of have these funny one-off experiences that you just wouldn't get in a lot of places, like, you know, being invited to a dinner with Nick Knight, and, you know, and then Grace having her dream of going to dinner with Lewis Hamilton, and, you know, there's David Beckham, and it's like all these people that you're sort of just going, oh, okay, this wouldn't happen in a lot of places.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
suppose it's like, because it's kind of a smaller city and everybody knows everybody. Everyone knows when somebody big is coming.
Yeah.
And then you kind of can kind of connect your way.
Yeah.
There.
So, you know, all the heads of fashion and all the designers and everyone who's kind of doing something or opening a store or launching a collection, or, you know, all of that stuff, they all sort of, you know, descend. And so you're meeting all of the designers and all of the fashion people and all of the, you know, leading creatives around the fashion industry. And it's just a constant process of meeting incredible people and making a lot of great relationships and friendships for the future. You know, you sort of, keeping in contact, and who knows, down the line you run into them again and, you know, talk about stuff later. So, yeah, it's good.
Is that where you got sort of your, got to work with kind of the biggest magazines and the biggest artists like Justin Bieber, Gemma Chan?
Yeah. All through Asia. Yeah, that was all Asia stuff.
Can you maybe give us an insight into, say, the Justin Bieber shoot, for example?
That one's a classic story of hurry up and wait. It's kind of, you know, it's sort of Justin, they said, oh, you got to be at the location at 9 o'clock, be ready to shoot. And of course we get there, we get set up, and it's just wait, you know, it was that. And so eventually he turns up sort of 3 hours later, and he's like, okay, cool, you know, got 15 minutes, let's go. And that was it. So you just, sometimes it's as quick as that, but, you know, in that funny way that you turn up with everything, and then eventually you just use like one single light, you know, thrown in a corner and pop in a background. And because, you know, the room they put us in just looked like a corporate, you know, meeting room kind of thing. I was just like, oh, great. Yeah. Okay, nice. So you're like, how do we do this? And so we quickly had to sort of throw up a background just to get rid of, you know, the kind of, you know, felt covered walls and stuff. And just threw a light in one of the corners, and we're just like, cool, we've got a very limited time. But yeah, kind of funny in that way that the dynamic between the whole Bieber team was kind of like this mad buzz. It's much like watching Entourage, you know, that TV show. It's exactly like that. So it's kind of funny, you know, the whole dynamic is fun. And he was actually just super cool. You know, he was really easy, kind of knew what he was in for, and, you know, all the rest. So we just got through it quick because, again, they had to run out the door anyway. So it was just like, let's
And
just have some
was it
fun.
kind of like you had to just work with what you had, sort of thing?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't in a studio. Was it?
No, no, it was in a hotel room,
Hotel.
in like a hotel boardroom, meeting place where you're pushing furniture
Yeah.
out of the way and trying to just, make a shot
Yeah,
that wasn't there. So
Must be like a common thing, say, with these bigger artists. Like when I had Grace on the podcast, she was talking about when she did the styling for Lana Del Rey, and she kind of they had to work with like a hotel room as well. I'm pretty sure. So
yeah,
it's not always like you have everything perfect. You got to be sort of on your feet.
yeah. That's the challenge, is that you do get put into a lot of those kind of situations where you're in a less than inspiring kind of location, and then they say, okay, cool, now you got 10 minutes. I'm like, all right, here we go. And so it's all, much like that. You do have to really think fast. And that, again, goes back to, as we were saying in the very beginning, that training of going, here's my plan, ditch that, right, we've got 10 minutes and we've got nothing to begin with, so let's figure something out. And, you can just get the best you can get at the time, and, sometimes it works and sometimes you're like, okay. But no, it was fun, the Bieber thing was quite fun, and at least it was kind of a cool bunch of people, so, made it less dramatic, and we were just having laughs and doing that. I wouldn't say it was kind of, a hugely memorable shoot in terms of the actual photography and the scale and whatever else. But it was just, cool to hang out and have some laughs with him for a very brief period, and, get the job done, and off they go. So
yeah, I've actually got the photo here, so I thought we could
nice one.
Just have a look at it, and maybe can scroll over.
For sure.
Maybe talk about how you shot it. Like, obviously it's got like a white wall there, so that must be the the white background.
Bit of paper.
Is it natural
No, that was
light?
just a paper.
It's paper.
Paper, and then no, we just had a single beauty dish which I threw up into the corner of the room, so it was just bouncing against these old curtains and just sort of washing backwards into the room, and that was it. I was like, no, that's enough.
And it was
we
in
don't need
15
any
minutes.
more. Yeah, I was like, just get it all done. Super simple, keep it, because it was also for Calvin Klein as well, so we kind of needed.
This does have that Calvin Klein.
So it had to just fit that vibe of of what they do and the way the feel of their work and all that. And, so it was super simple. It was. I think I had half a reflector going on up here, and then a light just bouncing off some old, curtains in a room, and that was it. And I was just like, that's it. That's what we need. Don't need to overcomplicate it. Let's just get going. Yeah. But again, it sort of comes down to that dynamic, and it's about the interaction, which is kind of, that's what makes the picture more than all the rest of the bits. That, apart from, not having terrible lighting, that's always something. But sometimes terrible lighting works too, if it's the vibe you're going for.
Make it artsy or something.
As long as the interaction is interesting, you can get away with terrible lighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Gemma Chan, like, she's a huge actress.
Yeah, super cool.
How did you get to work with her?
Again, someone called me from somewhere. Where were they based? They were maybe, I can't even remember. But it was for, who was I doing it for? Legend, #Legend magazine. And they called me and they're like, oh, Gemma's coming to town. She's doing like a film thing. And they're doing some work with St. Regis Hotel. So she was a guest of there and all the rest. So they were doing like a little, as you were talking about before, like the short content stuff for the hotel.
Yeah.
And then #Legend then kind of jumped into that and said, oh, can we do a cover? And then we'll bring the stylist and all that. So they were sort of upping the game on one end. And it was a bit of a collaboration really between the hotel and #. And so like, yeah, cool. And then they called up and said, oh, can you come in and do that? And I think that sort of also stemmed off the back of the Bieber thing too. So, they'd sort of seen and they're like, oh yeah, follow the line of who's doing all these pictures around town, and Sophia, Loren and all the rest. And I was like, oh yeah.
So in a way you're still kind of like, there's some sort of it's not really a ladder, but it's kind of like once you do one big shoot, it will connect to something else.
Yeah.
also, yeah, it's kind of like who you've worked with as well. But I guess the bigger the shoot, the more you're going to get noticed. So it's just naturally how it will flow.
Yeah, the evolution of how it is about having the work out there that gets noticed, and then people sort of follow the trail of, oh, who did that? Where does that come from?
Yeah.
So it's a bit of that as well. But she was super cool. It's really, really nice and so easy to shoot.
How did you sort of like, it was, looks like you got some natural lighting as well. Must be in the morning, and then you also had a soft light.
That's just a giant soft box as well, like an optic light sort of behind us. But it was sort of that, the light was sort of feeding in off that side windows. And we just kind of filled up the shadows, really. That was it.
And you got these people that were just naturally walking in the background?
Yeah, that's the bartender at the hotel. Because that's literally just the bar as it pretty much is. We just kind of walked in and went, nah, that looks cool, don't move a thing. And
Yeah, sometimes I like having that natural element in the shot. Makes it feel a bit more organic, adds like an interest.
Yeah, and I think in those situations it's kind of always nicer to work with natural light wherever you possibly can, because it just has that thing that just works without going into like a $50,000 light setup. It's nice just to be able to work with it and then just clean up shadows that if you want them cleaner. If not, just roll with it and set your shot in a way that kind of works with what you've got. And
it's almost like the big shoots that you do, sometimes they're just super simple, like they're the less technical ones. But I mean,
because you get the cool location.
Okay.
So that makes it a bit easier. And sometimes it's not about overthinking it. Sometimes I think on those big shoots you can get very caught up in gear and stuff and whatever. And I mean, even the job with Daniel Ricciardo, the tourism one, it's like we had none. It's like, you got a camera and let's go. Like, that's it. You've got 10 minutes in between, like filming. The filming crew were doing their bit, and we're like, here's a window. You got half an hour. Sun's there. That's it. We're done. No, not even a reflector. It's just like, just line it up so you get all the good bits, and we're finished. So so that's a huge budget shoot with nothing.
Yeah, that's a really recent one. It just came out.
Yeah, on last Thursday.
It's called The Dream, is it? Or
Drive the Dream.
Drive the Dream.
Drive the Dream, because it sort of ties in a bit with the campaigns they've been doing in the past. So that one just came out very recently, and so much fun. Much fun just hanging out with. It's like jumping in the car, going on a road trip with
some friends. Daniel
and his mate Blake, and took off from Geraldton, went up to what's that? Exmouth, sort of Denham, and then up towards Bazaar station through there. So, that was the one where I was in the water. Like, I was sort of hanging off the side of the boat on the other side, having to lie on that. There's sort of two of those on, the bottom of the back of the boat. So he's sitting on one and I'm lying on the other, just getting totally soaked and But
So you went and you saw some whale sharks.
Yeah, the guys jumped in, and we actually luckily had an amazing team of underwater filming and photography. So we were sort of directing them from the boat, and they were shooting for us underwater. So they'd come up, I'd jump in, we'd sort of check everything, and then they'd go back down, they'd shoot some more. So just because they were so familiar with the whale sharks and the way they move, and where to get in the right position, angles, lighting, lenses, all that stuff, that when the job came through and they're like, we've got to shoot this underwater stuff, how comfortable are you? And it's like, just call someone who's good at it and just let them do what they do best. So, sometimes it's just not worth trying to, in that critical moment where he's not going to hang around and wait for you to get the shot right. Like, it's just, when you don't get a second chance, it's like, just employ good people, just let them do their job.
So sometimes, like even you said, you get your assistant to do shoots. Sometimes it's not even you, like, taking actual photos.
Yeah. Sometimes you just, if it's like an editorial, then normally, I would, maybe even in an ad sometimes. If it's a case where I'm sort of setting up and directing, and like you said before, it's like, if having been the model, if you jump into the set and you're kind of performing with them,
Yeah.
then, whoa, sorry about that, people. And you jump in the set with them and you're kind of performing with them, and then you're just asking the assistant to kind of record that process, because I think that's kind of where, you know, I like to sort of be involved, but from a distance, because sometimes the camera being in the way creates this wall of separation. Yeah. So sometimes you just need to view it as its own thing, and kind of go, no, just let me watch it from a monitor or from a screen, so I can just stand back and actually view it with clear eyes, not being the one engaged in the technicality of capturing. It's like, is this working the way I want it to, without being involved?
Yeah, because sometimes when you're just behind the lens, you got so many more things to think about, like the settings, exposure, all of that. So I guess at a sort of higher level of photography, you want to kind of like, you can like step back, and because like where I'm at, like I'm doing all the shoots, and like say if it was Gemma Chan or Daniel Ricciardo, I'll be like, I need to be pushing the trigger, cause like my ego is like but I guess when at like a high level, photography is it's more than pushing a button, it's more than being the only one on set. It's like, it's teamwork, it's hiring the right people. You're almost more of a director. You know how to do everything. Yeah. So because you know how to do everything, you're kind of like directing. So yeah, it's more than just pushing the button. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's, again, it sort of comes back to that training of all parts of the process, to understand how they all work, and, you know, having the confidence to go, I don't need to push the button because I know what's going to come through, because I can see from every angle what, you know, they're looking that way, that's going to work, the light's happening there. And just having that sensibility of understanding. I guess that's an experience thing, and everyone will build their own over time. And it's that actually was really illuminated to me with as we were talking about wing before, and having worked with on that job with Chow Yun Fat about using the gaffer and the team that Wong Kar-wai uses to light all of his films. And so I was just kind of like working, you know, with these gods of film, and super cool and just so laid back. But just the way that he would sort of just walk into a set and he'd just be like looking at stuff, and he'd be like, no, you know, not even a light meter, he'd just be like, that one, just and that one, just do it that. And just these little subtle movements of every part of the set, and he'd be like, you're good now. And you just go like click, and he'd be like, yep, we're good. You know, it's that sort of amazing sensitivity to the way things feel, and he's just like, yeah, you're fine. And he's like, just push the button now. I'm like, I think it's that kind of confidence with your photography, because I think at a maybe lower level of photography, like bang, I want to shoot 1 million photos so that I can get the one. But then when you're really confident with your craft and you know each element, you know, it's like, it's easier because you're like, adjust this, click, and it's just like done. Yeah, there's a kind of funny thing that you will always get the frame within the first 5 or after 100. Yeah. Like all the stuff in the middle will be pretty average, but you'll get this amazing unknown enthusiasm, and then you'll work the hell out of the talent, and then they'll just get exhausted. Yeah. And then once they're at exhaustion, you get this incredible stuff after that where they just don't give a shit anymore. Yeah. And it's like they're the two amazing parts, and everything in the middle, you're like, oh, whatever. Yeah. It's like there's a performance part, but there's this magic in the beginning and the end that if you get stuck in the middle, it's just like, just keep going, keep pushing, wear them out, and then, you know, until they don't give a shit anymore. And then you'll find some really incredible stuff. Yeah, I've definitely found that as well. So funny. Yeah, and that's the way it's sort of got to be, I think, which is really nice. And then sort of back on the Daniel shoot. Yeah. So how many days were you out there? I'll say 4, I think. Yeah, 4 days out. But just fun. Like every day it literally was just a road trip with your friends. Like you know, everyone just piled into cars, just driving. Some days we spent like 8 hours driving just to get one shot, you know, before the sun went down. Just be doing nothing in the car, just talking crap with your friends.
And amazing team of people, the gang at Rhythm, you know, did such an awesome job. And, you know, the tourism clients were with us. They came on the shoot, and they were really super cool. So, you know, we had just an epic road trip, really. That was kind of why it was so nice. And the shooting was kept really simple. Like, it wasn't overcomplicated. We weren't performing.
Like, didn't have a lot of lights and...
No, and he didn't have to perform. He was just like, they would just put him in a car and they'd set up cameras in the car and it's like, just drive. You and Blake just get on the road and drive. And, you know, just kind of get your music, do whatever. Let's just keep rolling. And they just left them to do everything. So every shot pretty much was just them being them, which was really nice. So, you know, I think they're the kind of dream jobs that you get that don't come along very often. So, you know, having that sense of freedom, which I think is really nice.
Yeah. So. And so were you guys like camping or?
I'll say glamping.
Glamping?
Bit of both. I think I managed to get the good beds every night, which was pretty good. Yeah, I didn't have to sleep in the back of the car, so that was handy. Had a shower on most days. But it was a pretty incredible trip to be a part of. And nice to be out there again, because I haven't been out there for such a long time. So done some documentary films out that way. But, you know, I'm sort of really super comfortable in that massive open space. I think that's kind of where I really enjoy being. So, yeah.
You did some sort of work for the conservation, was it the WA?
Yeah, Australian Wildlife Conservancy. Yeah, we do, been working on a documentary and film series where sort of they have all these properties all around Australia where they go and do their work and their research, and they rehabilitate land, really sort of destocking it from feral animals, and they sort of fence it off so it becomes these little islands where, you know, all these sort of endangered animals can now exist without fear of cats and, you know, foxes and all that stuff, where they're just sort of being eaten alive every day. So yeah, that's their work. And then so we travel out to the middle of nowhere with a bunch of artists, like, you know, 5 or 6 artists at a time, and go and stay out with the scientists out in the bush and just kind of live out in these camps in the middle of nowhere. And there's no phone contact, no nothing. It's just like you're pretty much on your own, which is really cool. And they have all the Indigenous rangers who are out there working with them and stuff. So we just get these insane experiences out in the middle of the bush, which is great. But the incredible luxury of they provide a chef in camp as well. Wow. So at the end of the day, you've sort of gone through these insane journeys of like mountain climbing with tons of camera gear and all that, and, you know, shooting helicopters and kind of doing all that fun stuff. And then at least you get back at the end of the day and you're like, oh, cool, I can actually relax and chill. But then, you know, then you've got your 3 hours of footage and logging to kind of worry about. But at least it's kind of nice to get back at the end of the day and have, you know, someone else worry about, oh God, that's right, I don't have to cook a tin of beans now, so I'm good. Yeah. Actually have a really nice meal. And yeah, I've been doing that for I think 6 years. We did 3 films over 6 years. I think they're working on 2 more films, which I haven't been a part of because that was right through the middle of COVID. Mm-hmm. Couldn't leave Hong Kong. No, the first one was, the protests in Hong Kong. Yeah. I couldn't get out of Hong Kong.
So you were living in Hong Kong at the time?
Yeah.
What was that like? Must have been
got pretty crazy intense, there for a while. Yeah. That's actually why we left. We'd been in it for the best part of a year and just couldn't see that it was going to get any better. And it was kind of a real shame that, it did end up the way it ended up. But Theo couldn't go to school, and it just became such a kind of intense kind of, layer on top of your day of, okay, where am I going to? What's going on in that part of town? Which groups are there in that area? What am I wearing? What am I carrying? Like, it sort of became this real kind of, mess with your head way of just existing on a day-to-day basis, and that every day you had to think on these multiple levels of where am I, and am I going to get beaten up by triads or police or arrested or taken away as a protester, like all of that stuff. So it was kind of, got a bit intense there for a while. So after a year of that, we were just like, this is not working anymore. So
as much as it's like a hustle city, it's also like quite stressful to live in that.
Yeah, well, the real problem was that even, being the city that it is, everything in the retail sector kind of shut down. Everything kind of ended, and we had to just jump because...
So you didn't have much work on, I guess?
Because there was no work.
People go to Hong Kong to buy like luxury items and that sort of thing, which is, I guess, where a lot of work comes from.
Yeah, so all the work and advertising that stems out of the luxury market is where we were sort of doing most of our work. And so when all the retail stopped, then the luxury spending stops, and then the money that goes into the advertising to do that stops, and so the whole cycle kind of, ends up with the handbrake on. And that sort of went on for a long time. Whole shopping malls were closed down, and so the economy sort of, really slowed down. On a creative sense, it all sort of went very slow very quickly. So we were just sort of going, okay, how long can we sit this out for? Because you are just sort of burning money every day the longer you hang around. So it was pretty tough time. But we then just jumped out and sort of were, okay, let's make a decision. It's Perth or UK. And that was right at the beginning of Brexit, so it was kind of like, okay, so we went, maybe UK is not the best option right now. So we jumped out of there and landed here, and we didn't even know that COVID was a thing at that stage. It was. I think we were about 3 weeks ahead of the first COVID cases in the world. So
I suppose that was good that you came.
Yeah, we landed here.
Perth is one of the best places
to
stay during that time.
So we landed, and like 2 or 3 weeks later, they were like, "Oh, there's this thing in Wuhan." And I was like, "Oh, Jesus, that was lucky." So that sort of, it was our golden ticket out of there. I don't know what happened. Grace made a good call on that one. She was like, "Let's get out." Yeah. So she has this amazing sense of decision making and timing and all that stuff. So I'm just like, "Yep, I follow you. We're good."
And did you already have a place in Perth to live, or?
Yeah, well, luckily way back in 2006 or 2007, I bought a little apartment here in South Perth and just kind of thought nothing of it. It was just like part of my business was just had an investment and had it rented out, and and eventually it just turned out years later, now it's our home. So it was kind of like this perfect timing, and everything sort of landed all at the right spot, and the people who were in there were just finishing their lease, and we had just got back into town, so
lined up.
Thankfully that was it. That was sort of it's been our pad.
And then having that epic sort of career in sort of Europe and Hong Kong, and working in China and Asia, and then working with big artists and big brands and that sort of thing, and then what was it like coming back to Perth, where we're not as connected, we're one of the most isolated cities? What was that like?
See, maybe it's sort of funny, maybe because I see Perth as from an insider and an outsider's perspective. I have this sort of dual vision of it, which I'm very lucky to have, and also lucky to have Grace's kind of international perspective on it too. So we were actually really happy when we got here, because for me it was like coming back to a whole new place, because when I left in 90, whatever it was, 91, 92, there wasn't much going on. And the opportunity was fairly limited. So to come back to a whole new reinvented city that is totally connected with the rest of the world, and all that, other than
you find it is connected,
other than its kind of physical isolation, I find that the interactivity between people here and the rest of the world is really, it's kind of what we were hoping for, I guess, way back then. So that was sort of, it was nice that it did sort of come around. But I have friends who've lived here the whole time, but they still work internationally every other day. All their clients are international, and they still go like, why would I leave? I was like, I've got the beach right there, I've got all the stuff, I've got clients from all over the world who call me. They don't care where I live, you know, and so that's kind of nice that, yeah, you can have that,
Best
which
of
is
both
cool.
worlds, yeah.
Yeah, even though it doesn't have that chaotic spontaneity of say, you know, Hong Kong or those other cities. It has its own vibe, which is nice.
Would have been definitely a change of pace coming from Hong Kong.
Yeah, I think the thing that I missed most was the chaos.
Really?
Yeah, I'd become so used to that rhythm of just so many
Bang, bang,
amazing accidents happening in front of you all the time. You're just like,
Yeah.
oh wow, how does all that work? You know, how does it all come together? And it's not, there's no design to it. It's just, you know, 5 million people jammed into a small space, and it's like, oh, it just happens. It's like this little magical mist that sort of floats around, and it's good and it's bad and it's crazy and it's chaos and it's all that fun stuff. You're just watching this mad orchestra going on all at once. To come here and then just go, oh. But the other thing, weirdly, as a photographer, is that in Hong Kong, your visual reference is vertical. So everything you look at is up and down.
Yep.
Whereas you get back to Perth and everything's horizontal. So now I had to really adjust my vision for a long time to sort of get used to everything being wide and flat instead of tall and
Almost
skinny.
feels like an exact opposite, like Hong Kong's the exact opposite to Perth. If you look at the urban design, the culture, and I had a really interesting conversation with Nick Juniper, who's an architect here in Perth.
Yeah.
And he deals with kind of how urban design affects kind of social interactions.
Yeah.
And yeah, here in Perth it's sprawled out, so it's harder to connect with people, and you're not kind of bumping into people, whereas Hong Kong, it's he was talking about urban density, so Perth is low density, so spread out, and Hong Kong is like very high density, so you're kind of bumping into people. So
yeah,
interesting.
That's exactly it too. It's just, I think the way creativity in Perth works is that you have to work at a way of not only creating your work, but you have to work it in a way that's good enough to get people out of their space and into your space. So you kind of, you know, that's I think what we need to work on in the future, is how to bring people together into more connected spaces, because it is a car city, you know, everyone's, it's like everything about this city is like, you know, you want to go to an event, oh, where do I park my car? You know, like, or how do I get there? Yeah. It's just like, that's your kind of first major thought, is like, oh, car, you know, like you would love to just be able to jump out and walk to wherever you got to go to, but yeah, there is that, there are the physical boundaries of it. So you've got to make events that are sort of so almost well designed that, or, you know, you having exhibitions and shows and stuff and sort of going, where can I put this, which is ultimately you've got to address people's convenience first almost. It doesn't matter how good the work is, if it's hard to get to, people are like, oh, like that, you know, like I might go if I can be bothered. But yeah, it's a real challenge, I think, and it's a fun challenge too, which, you know, makes it very interesting. Yeah,
like it's like I'm just doing these podcasts and discovering all the barriers that Perth has for creatives, and yeah, definitely like the urban design of it and the difficulty of there's a difficulty of connecting and collaborating. I find like, oh, do you want to meet at this time? And then it's like, oh, that person's like 45 minutes away or whatever, and then it's like something might come up, and it's here in Perth, you know, we like to stay in our house, because like if we leave the house, then it's like it'll take a whole day to do the task. Whereas like if you're in Hong Kong, you're like you're probably like next door. Just on a different.
Yeah, Grace was quite amazing at that way of, you know, we'd go out for a night of doing stuff, and she'd have this sort of great mission of, okay, we're going in here just for 10 minutes or whatever, and it was literally like you just go in and say a quick hi to people, and you just move and go to the next one. And so it was a sort of funny way of, you know, covering quite a few different places that you had to be in all in one night, and you're like, because you wanted to see all the people that you know, work with and play with. So it was kind of, she just had a very precise way of going through and just making sure that she caught hosts and guests and stuff, and it's like, cool, I made it, come to see, you know, and we sort of have really great interactions, but they're all very quick. And then you sort of go, okay, cool, we are going to catch up during the week, you know, at some other point, because it's, you know, on those nights too, they're all, as you know, any exhibition opening night, it's not about viewing the work, it's just about hanging out with your friends and having a drink. So it's kind of always that case of making a point to go back the next day or the day after and just actually viewing the work and seeing what's, you know, and actually, you know, getting involved in it that way. So Yeah.
And what's it been like having Grace as your partner? Because obviously she's an international stylist.
Superstar.
And, yeah, superstar. I suppose like when you meet another creative, whoever it is, like you're always like bouncing ideas and you're working together. And how did that kind of change what you do as a photographer and that sort of thing? As a creative?
I think as probably that thing, Grace has got such a strong vision of what she likes and the way that she sees things, and also because I'm very much in that, collaborative headspace, is that I'm always happy to jump on a ride just to see where it goes. Like I don't need to hold the map. It's I'm
you're kind of like
I'm like I'll contribute at 100%, and even though I'm not controlling the output, I'm happy to go along for the ride.
Yep.
I just want to see what happens. It's just a fascination with creativity. However it turns out, if it's something that it comes that I never expected, for me that's a success. It's like I always want to be in a place where I'm surprised and I don't know the answer, and I feel like that is a win for me. So having Grace in, and we sort of bounce around ideas all the time, and a lot of the time we'll be on a shoot and Grace will be directing it, and I'm just like, yeah, cool, like what, that's fine by me, like because I completely trust her vision and I know what she does and she does it so well, so I'm just like, cool, I don't always need to be driving. It's quite happy to be a passenger sometimes and sort of just contribute all the stuff that I can, and then just go on the adventure, much like the road trip. It's like I don't know where we're going to end up. And that's what's kind of nice, and having a creative partner and someone that you trust to do stuff, and just go, yep, for sure, take the wheel, go for it.
Cool.
Yeah.
And like living in Perth now, because you said your friends have work internationally. Is it we live in sort of the time of the internet now where you can like make connections. Is a lot of your friends' work and your work, they kind of just send it to you online and then you do it here, or are they sort of flying you out?
No, I think it's more like sending stuff here and getting ideas together or connecting with people internationally and building ideas online, and then wherever they can sort of come together. Working in ways that we couldn't do before, which is kind of fantastic. So, I think it's always a case of just finding, you find your audience now almost a whole lot easier than before. It's like your audience does exist, even if you're making, purple unicorn sculptures. There'll be someone in the world who loves it, and now you can actually find those people pretty easily. Whereas in the past, it was always like you had to take your little unicorn and off you went on a plane somewhere, and it's like, is there anyone here that likes this? It's. Whereas now it's kind of your audience does already exist out there somewhere. You just got to connect with them, and that's the fun part too. I don't think people should get discouraged by living in Perth. That's for sure. It's certainly a whole lot easier now than it ever has been before. I think finding, and if it means that, once you find your audience, if it means then you want to leave and go to wherever they are, whether it's, Berlin or somewhere in the middle of America or wherever, it's then go. But you kind of know that you're finding your group, the people who speak your language, things they love, what you love, you can kind of find them. They're not far away now. Whereas before it was a very different, long road of, a lot of accidents, and which is also part of the fun. Yeah. Yeah.
So sort of wrapping up now, you also sort of give advice, as someone who's lived in Perth and gone to Sydney and then sort of internationally, what sort of like final advice would you give to a creative or a photographer living here who want to have a sort of career that you have?
Put yourself in as many different positions as you can to meet lots of people, because you just never know you never know how those dots are going to join up. They always seem so far apart and so random until they happen. You're in a room with someone who knows someone who does something that's, sees something that I think just get in and create as often as you can, and don't think too much about trying to hit all these points or follow a roadmap, because I think if you follow the roadmap, you end up working on a to-do list and you're just checking stuff off a to-do list. And then you're not looking at all the magic that's happening along the sides, Like it's kind of jump on that road and just, a lot of the time I just say yes. Say yes to stuff.
And see where it goes, sort of thing.
But then try and break it straight away. Try as quickly as possible to find where no is. And then you go, okay, I've said yes. Let's try and break this thing down to a no. And if I can't get to a no, then it means, yeah, we're good. Let's go.
Okay.
So it's kind of feeling where you feel comfortable and go, like, what are all my barriers? Are any of those going to stop me? Like, is there any great difficulty that will stop me from moving this thing forward? Or is it just a bad idea or whatever? If you feel really negatively about it, I'm always sort of positively trying to push it for a yes until I get alarming no's that just go like, yeah, forget, that's just stupid. And one of them is that, as we spoke about, the working for free thing and all the rest. It's like, you can't be, I think you've got to hold your value, and you've got to really understand the business side of what we do. It's like, as much as it's fun and it's an adventure, there's a solid business case in there that you've got to understand. You've got to know how to talk to people, and you've got to know about contract law, copyright, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's a major, major topic that, I'm trying to dig in with a few other creatives in Perth and trying to actually put something together that helps people out.
It's something that I've sort of been learning about lately, is that business side, which I'm kind of pretty good at the creative side, but the business side, something I need to learn more about, and learning how to hold my ground as a creative and be, because sometimes you just really want to work on a project, but and so it's hard to hold your ground, and in that business thing, like, hey, I'm not going to work on this unless you like sign the agreement form, or unless you put down like this deposit. It's especially in Perth where maybe the opportunity is like scarce or something. I find it hard to do that, but it's something that I'm working on. If you're listening, try to learn about that business side, like the boring paperwork stuff is important.
It'll come back around. It'll be incredibly important in the long term if you want to survive as a creative. Learning the language of the business side of it, because that's super, super important to having any lasting ability to last in the industry, is that people understand, what your copyright is and the value of your copyright. But also thinking, I was just discussing it with a friend the other day, and we were saying that, the problem with creatives in that we will work for nothing because we love our job. And that's the very problem with the whole industry, is that try and ask your electrician to come around to your house and fix your thing because he loves it. Like, how often does that happen? He's always going to send you an invoice. It's like, he doesn't love it that much. But we do. We sort of love what we do so much that we're willing to just give it away, which is the big killer. At the end of the day, that's the hardest thing. And understanding the value of creativity, not